for being here. We're going to go ahead and start with our perspectives from the General Assembly, and I will turn it over to Katie Boyle.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Nancy. So good afternoon, everyone. Just want to welcome everyone to our last session of the day. It's been great content so far. And now we have a really great opportunity to hear from legislators who truly are champions for human services in the General Assembly. And so very fortunate and grateful today to be joined by Senator Mason. And I want to give a shout out to see if Delegate Brewer has been able to join us. I know she's planning to be here. She might be here a little bit later on. Just didn't know if maybe she was on the phone. Well, maybe
we'll just have to talk about her until she shows up.
Okay. That's right. Might be just a perspective from the Senate. But my name is Katie Boyle. I'm the Health and Human Resources staffer for the Virginia Association of Counties. Today I'm wearing my VALHSO hat as the legislative co-chair for VALHSO, and I'm very pleased to be moderating this session. And Rebecca Vinroot is also helping with this and monitoring the chat, and we work together to put this session together. So hopefully you've had a chance to review the full bios and the handout that Ripple sent around, but by way of a brief introduction, Senator Mason represents the 1st State Senate District, including the City of Williamsburg, parts of Newport News, James City County, Hampton, York County, and the City of Suffolk. And in the Senate, one of his committee assignments is the Rehabilitation and Social Services Committee. And among many appointments to boards and commissions, he serves on the Behavioral Health Commission and also the State Executive Council for Children's Services. And so definitely want to thank you so much for being here, especially during an extremely busy time of the year. I mean, it's always busy for legislators, but it feels especially busy this year. And so just really want to thank you for being here today. For just as a reminder for attendees, I think we're going to try to manage questions in the chat just because there's so many people on the line. And so Senator Mason, I'm going to kick things over to you. And if we might maybe start with behavioral health, since I know that's been an issue you've been working on quite a bit.
Sure, absolutely. Thank you very much, Katie. I appreciate y'all having me today. There are a couple million topics associated with that one. Obviously, we have had most immediately a safety crisis in our state hospitals. And so the commissioner shut down admission to, I think it was 8 of them. They have, until they could get their census under control. Unfortunately, that at the same time, I was with the former Deeds Commission, now the Behavioral Health Commission. I was in charge of a work group to review what's going on in our emergency departments and the real crisis with finding a bed. And unfortunately, that when we shut the state hospitals down, that certainly didn't alleviate that problem or make it any easier. But we are really, really trying to focus on how can we find places to get people treated that is not in an emergency department, not in a jail, or not in a state hospital. Now, most certainly, many will need to go to state hospital at times, but if we could work on and make sure that the people that go there are the most in need of treatment at a state hospital, and we're not sending so many there for competency restoration or minor offenses, or largely because we don't have the community-based structure to take care of. That is really a focus. The new Behavioral Health Commission has just started as a joint commission in the General Assembly. We are in the process of beginning to hire an executive director and a staff of people. I think that will be outstanding. But the last Deeds Commission meeting, we all furthered the idea that we would try to free up what came out of a report in October of 2020, money for CTACs and crisis intervention centers to try to take people. We asked for a review of upwards of $37 million to get, well, we knew we wouldn't, every CTAC isn't ready to expand or able to expand, but those that were able to and ready, we wanted to get them that money. As that money came through our special session, that was $10 million now, with an eye towards another 26, 27 next budget. What should be noted about anything we just approved for the next budget is that it is just that. it is next budget. And so there will be a new biennium budget in this session of the General Assembly. Certainly we have said we want and will put many things in that. And I'm certain the governor will send that money down in his final budget. But then, of course, it's subject to the approval and the review and the debate of the General Assembly. So I was a little disappointed that we didn't have more upfront for this effort. But in trying to work closely with behavioral health now to determine where are we dispersing money now? I mean, who are we trying to look for now? We just had a meeting locally last week with one of my spectacular CSBs. I'm blessed to have two of the finest CSBs in Virginia on the Virginia Peninsula, and they are struggling to keep up. But we had a meeting with a private provider and the CSB to see if we can take a little different approach, a little different direction to try to get people to treatment as quickly as possible, because on any given Monday, you've got 15 to 20 people that have been in an emergency department all weekend trying to find a bed. So there are so many different directions that I could go down with behavioral health. So if you want me to talk about anything in particular, I'm happy to do so. But it's kind of a good segue from your last group. Your last group talked about new ways of doing business and looking at things differently and trying to make change, and how difficult that is for folks like yourselves who are under-resourced and overtaxed. But we just are requiring a new way and if we're going to get to the community base that we're trying to move the model over the course of time, we've got to do things differently in the short term to try to address some of the stressors on the system that we have currently.
Yeah, thank you. I think you really set the stage really well there. And so you touched on this a little bit, but I think the General Assembly was interested in helping with kind of the emergency, the urgent needs with the state hospital during the special session. I mean, maybe you can talk a little bit about that, and maybe what might be considered for sort of like the bigger picture change of the system, the way that what you've been discussing.
Sure. Well, bolstering the CTACs that we have in place that are ready to expand is number one, because that allows law enforcement to hand off the patient and security to be in place. And so law enforcement is not stuck in an emergency department with someone shackled to a bed for hours upon end. That is a big first step. Secondarily, in those facilities, you can begin to provide treatment. There's no worse place for someone having a mental health crisis than a chaotic emergency room where beepers and buzzers are going off and people are coming and going, and there's mass movement of people. It's just not a type of environment to try to get people back on the course of getting well. We are looking at other models. The Raleigh, North Carolina has a model that if you're picked up in the field and you have a mental health crisis, you are taken to one place, not to an emergency room. You're taken to one area that is designed kind of a larger CTAC that begins the treatment immediately. In Alameda, California, they have that same type of facility, but a different model. You go to the hospital first, and you're treated and medically cleared, and then taken to the facility where you can start having treatment done. So, some of these 23-hour kind of rest places and facilities within CTACs that people that are there voluntarily could, just come down and start to relax and try to get into a better place. But we just, between the timeline of the emergency custody order and then the temporary detention order, we're just putting enormous pressure on our CSBs to do things that they've never done before, as well as our law enforcement officers who are saying, wait a minute, I have got to execute this court document, but the facility that's filled in to take this patient, it is not accepting people. And so we're putting them in a very, very difficult situation as well. So I think regional operations where more than one community come together and have a place that we can alleviate some of the pressure on our emergency departments. And then certainly some of those folks will have to go to a state facility and need longer term treatment. But at Eastern State, 53% of the people there over the last several years have been sent there under forensic TDO by our state, by the courts or law enforcement in jail. And of those, 35 to 40% of them are sent there for misdemeanors. So trespassing, petty larceny, failure to appear to have their competency restored. Now, I don't argue that some people that have committed a misdemeanor crime do not need state hospitalization, but certainly sending someone to Eastern State at a cost of $890 a day for an average stay of 52 days, spending $47,000 in a state facility to have someone's competency restored, to send them back to general district court to stand trial for trespassing just doesn't make any sense. And so we've got to figure out how we did some work last year on mandatory outpatient treatment. We have to work with how we've established that in the code. There's still more work to be done, but certainly that could be an answer. But we just also have to provide more resources to community-based systems because as my colleagues came to the realization that what I was telling them was so, they determined that, well, the judge must feel like there's nowhere else for them to go, so they have to send them there. So those are kind of some of the structural things that I think we can look at and need to address.
Yeah, that's great. I know I sat in on some of your subcommittee meetings, and I know you had asked stakeholders to come and say, if we were going to provide resources to address this problem, where should we direct them? And you got a whole lot of different ideas. So do you have a sense of kind of how that conversation is shaping up in terms of priority spending items? I mean, certainly the commissioner had asked for money from ARPA for bonuses for direct care staff to kind of retain the staff that they have. And then I know there's sort of a thought about doing a commitment for salaries for direct care staff, sort of with the next tranche of ARPA funds. But in terms of kind of an ongoing general fund commitment, I mean, do you have a sense of what the legislature's thinking there?
Well, we did. ARPA money was supposed to be one-time expense, but we were in a different circumstance with our state hospitals in that we were so understaffed. And I'm going to round some numbers, but we're paying an average $12, $13 an hour. We're paying a contract company $30 to provide staffers that are being paid at $19 or $20. So we argued that if we just raise the salary of the frontline staffers there, we're already paying it out. We're actually paying out more. At one hospital, if we raised it to like $19, $20 an hour, it'd only been like another $100,000 in the budget cost from what we're already paying. So that was a little different and unusual. But I know certainly from the last Behavioral Health Commission, you heard Senator Deeds take the words right out of my mouth, and we need to look at this system-wide. We shut the state hospital systems down because it wasn't safe. We're getting money for the people in the state hospitals. Those are very important. But guess what? Never have we mentioned that someone just put in the chat, CSBs and taking care of their workforce shortages, the money we pay them. So we have got to do a better job, I think, of looking at this system more comprehensively, and not just the state hospitals, but across the board, people providing the services. Because again, someone else in the chat mentioned that this may be the same case out from way Western Virginia, but a child was in the emergency room for like 6, 7, 8 days. And with so we are really short on beds for juveniles and for children, number one. CHKD will come online in a couple of years in Norfolk, which will really help, but that's in a couple of years. So right now, I think our one children's hospital has the capacity of being something like 38, 40 beds, but we're at 18 because that's what we have determined that we can handle. And so that has to be addressed short term very quickly. And I think so. I think salaries most certainly, but some of these other alternative facilities to take people, as I said, that is not an emergency room, that is not a state hospital, and is not a jail. will be critical.
Yeah. We've got a question in the chat from Leslie that I might pose to you, because she says the public system and legislature are attempting to figure out ways to strengthen the behavioral health system, and what role does mental health parity and private insurance play in this discussion, just to kind of open that.
Well, so one thing we've got in a conversation we had last week at my local level, we talked about people that have insurance or are under Medicaid. We've got to make sure that we spread them through the system. It can't all go to one place or another. I have the private hospitals have a myriad of proposals on the table to try to do more. I think there are places that we have to lean on them to do more. So I mean, it's a difficult change. And someone also said pay at the local level, of course. When we talk workforce and what we're talking about, behavioral health or human services, social services at all, we're struggling for workforce. And so we have to do more to try to train and educate people to go into these fields from the start. And then we have to find and pay them a legitimate salary to get them and to keep them into the keep them in the system, in doing these jobs. I'm not sure what she means by mental health parity, but certain. But if you mean that the hospitals have to take people that are not covered by insurance as well, that is a must. One of my initial hospitals that we had this conversation with was just trying to come up initially with something to alleviate the pressure on their emergency departments. And we've asked them to consider what would it be like if we all pull together multiple systems, multiple groups, multiple communities to have this be a larger picture and a larger solution. And we're in the infant stages of the conversation, but I'm optimistic that everybody working together can get it done. But then we have to figure out, once we get someone treated and released, how do we keep up with them? How do we help them? How do, we talk about the long-term injectables, right, which 30 days from now you need again. How do we manage folks and help them get to where they need to go to get these things, and and have reliable transportation and systems, and all these things intersect a little bit, Katie. I was listening to the Family First conversation. I've been very involved in that. It's extremely exciting that we're looking at prevention, which we've never done. But since we've never done it, that means we're setting up an entirely new structure, system, and have to find more evidence-based programs that qualify. But if we can focus on prevention, we can, as Kristen said, try to reduce the number of kids in foster care or aging out. Until such time, locally, the Commission on Youth just came and we had a roundtable with two former foster kids who've done well. But listening to their story and how close they were to falling out and not doing well, maybe even with tragic circumstances, was astounding. And so next week, I believe Rebecca and I and Ven are pulling a bunch of folks together from the community to talk about how do we help kids that are aging out of foster care. How do we help? And we understand we need to get to them early, right? We're not at 15, 16, 17, but we're going to start with a focus there. Who do we know that are getting close to aging out? Because when you start having the conversation, it's not just about a job. It's consistency. It's the ability for them to have a place to live, to be able to get to and from a job, to have a phone, so it's a much broader conversation than just, hey, let's get this guy a job and everything will be fine. We got to put all different layers of the community together. And our roundtable next week is the first start. We're bringing the chamber in to talk about the job side. We're bringing the United Way in to talk about the community opportunities. We're talking about housing. We're going to kick it off with a, what can we be that is better than what we have today? And I think that, it's tough for y'all because y'all have so many requirements Every time we go to Richmond, we send you a new, really neat form that you have to fill out and send back, which makes your life even more difficult. But we really need your help and your ideas as far as where we can change things, where we can adjust things. And I think my role as kind of a convener in the community is to bring folks together. How many times have the Chamber of Commerce thought about foster care? I would guess maybe never, right? Why would they? Maybe there have been a foster family, and that's tremendous. But but living in a tourist area where everyone is dying for workforce and to find employees, we have a whole group of young adults who are going to be ready and want to work, and we need to help them find the work, and that will help us with our situation at the same time. That is, Andy, you are exactly right. Oh, okay, I got you. So, yeah, I mean, the conversation goes very simply. Why isn't mental health treated like diabetes or hypertension? It is a health care issue. And with proper treatment, proper medication, and proper help, people can live very productive and good lives. But we've got to look at it that way. We have to treat it that way. And you're right. Having someone stuck in an emergency department for days upon end with no treatment, I mean, one of my first work group meetings, one of our advocates said they want treatment immediately. These are doctors, why aren't they doing it? Well, my friend who's an emergency room doctor said, well, if you come in with a fractured leg, we treat you immediately. We get you stabilized and we turn you over to an orthopedic surgeon. It's no different in mental health. If we know your medications and you will agree to take them, we can begin. But sometimes we don't know those things, so we need to get you to a trained mental health physician to get the treatment that you need.
Well, so one of the reasons your name was top of mind in terms of legislators to ask to come and speak was that you see the human services as a holistic system, and you have expertise in a lot of different areas. So I wonder if I could ask you to talk a little bit about CSA as in your services on the State Executive Council, and maybe the work that you've done on Private Day.
Sure. Well, so your last panel was something that's occupied a great deal of our time, Family First. But from this council as well, we passed the Ken Gap program last year in Virginia, which when people were not eligible for foster care, they weren't able to get compensation to try to take care of kin, foster kids or children in need. So that's work that we've done, and now we need to implement and make sure we find opportunities to utilize it. It's weird the way the General Assembly works with programs, I guess, across the board, but certainly with CSA and with children efforts, is we pass it in a General Assembly session. It starts in July, right? July 1. Well, I'm chomping at the bit to go back next session to say, look how this works. Look at what we've done with these things. Oh, by the way, let's provide some more money to have this conversation. And yet, because of the cycle it takes, you don't in your next session necessarily have many wins that you can take back and show. I think the Ken Gap is going to take some time to get off the ground, but we're working hard to get that done. The Private Day is a good example of a challenge that's been around for decades. I find that when I engage on things that I end up with people that say, yeah, we had this conversation 20 years ago, nothing's changed. But I again, like in the last panel, don't see the reason for it, but don't see that as a way to say, oh, shoot, we've tried it once, let's not go at it again. Private Day is extraordinarily expensive for localities as a budget item and for CSA. But it just as in our state-run mental hospitals, we want to make darn sure that the children with the greatest need end up in Private Day, that we do all that we can locally to keep them in a least restrictive environment closer to home, That's what this effort is about. One thing that was passed with the effort is the ability to, for the first time ever, use some CSA money to transition people back. But again, that's going to take some time because we've just gone into a school year, so we may or may not have even any examples of that by the next General Assembly session. But it's a first time that we're trying to be able to use money that says, okay, this child is doing much better. We believe they can possibly be cared for back in the schools. Let's try to provide the transition assistance necessary to get them back. What does that look like? Everybody on this call has a different idea when I say that out loud, what that could be. And so that's part of what we're figuring out. Also areas, I always use the Northern Neck as my example, since we had Rebecca on from Middlesex earlier. Can we go together? One school system most certainly can't go it alone, but here on the Virginia Peninsula, we have New Horizons, which I believe are 6 different school systems that have a public day program that they pay into, and is run by kind of by a head, but he's almost like a superintendent unto himself, because each system pays in, and they're students there from the full gamut and the full extreme, to communicating via keyboard, to fully functioning and just needing extra attention. Now, and again, all these things intersect, because just like with the aging out of foster care and trying to find jobs, we can't just solve for a private day situation. Some students are never going to be able to work alone in public. Some of them, we'll have to have in a structured environment where we can do some things like the ARC or Versability in my neck of the woods. But what we can't do are some of these highly functioning folks just say, okay, you graduated, congratulations, nice job, and that's it. We have to, as a community, as a chamber of commerce, as a business person, we have to work together with these schools to try to find. I had a mother chase me down after a fundraising breakfast one day, and she never reached out to me. I really always wish I had gotten more information, because she just said her son had done the best he could and had done so well, and they were so proud. And the last 2 years after school, he just sits at home and watches television all day, and he's regressing. They need something for him to do. And these folks can make such great employees and be such a valuable part of organizations if we just as a community, as a group, work to try to help them do so. The private day's got a long way to go. We're just going to issue kind of a data-driven report this session, and then we're going to work. And the question is, do we transfer private day over to the Department of Education? Because it is an educational IEP that CSA funds and pays for, but that's about it. They don't have any input into it. There's some question as far as the role of the community team that meets. Could they provide more services or more opportunity for the child rather than just private day? But the elephant in the room there is that CSA and private day educational funding is some sufficient. And obviously we know from our lives the Department of Education is not some sufficient. We need to pay a lot more. So there are a lot of challenges left, but again, it's I've got another one about seniors. I have a senior work group to determine what kind of focus and attention are being paid to seniors at the state level. My question I ask is, who wakes up every day and goes to work trying to drive the bus on creating opportunities for solving issues associated with and addressing senior needs? We failed miserably and didn't have a local social services person on the work group. I did not set the work group. In fact, I'm not even on the work group. But but that's got a long way to go too, because what does that look like? Because and I'm sorry to kind of jump around on you here, but these things in my mind all kind of flow We have a children's ombudsman now in Richmond. And he has already brought to me 2 or 3 things. Did you know this was happening over there? Oh, you didn't? Well, do you know that this program is this over here? That's what I'm thinking when I think of seniors and elevating the level of seniors, because we have an enormous geriatric mental health issue. Um, Senior transportation, aging in place, healthcare. There's so many in-home services, assisted living. There's so many components to it that cross multiple secretariats. They don't all just live in HHR. And so, we heard from Florida where they have a cabinet level secretary for aging. We heard from Ohio, cabinet level secretary for aging. Minnesota, not cabinet level, but an executive director. And she is also the executive director of a 26-person board appointed by the governor to focus just on senior issues. So, what are we doing in Virginia? And again, what can we do better? I think a minute ago we were joking before we started that, a lot of you probably just say, Monty, please leave us alone. We got enough to do. Stop making things difficult for us. But I think, you can always make what you do better. And we can always learn from James City County, can learn something going on down in Newport News and Hampton. These issues do not stop at jurisdictional boundaries. And so if you're doing something extremely well in Middlesex, then we should shout it from the tallest rooftop and try to see, can we scale it? Can we do it in other places?
Yeah.
Huh. Oh, that's a great one, Rebecca.
Oh, yeah.
Sorry. So Rebecca says, complexities of the system, any recommendations not to overwhelm your legislators and engage them? That's a super question. I think, I was assigned Family First by Bryce Reeves, who just said, look, man, this is big. Nobody knows anything about it. You go learn it and come back and tell us what we need to do. Bryce, the Republican chairman of the committee. That's kind of how I got here. And then Jennifer Wexton got elected to Congress. They had spent 2 years coaching me up on this stuff. I felt like I should try to keep it going with CSA. So I am the farthest thing from an expert you can get on this stuff. Y'all, I try to learn from y'all every day. But I do believe that one of the reasons child welfare, private day, all these issues that we've touched on briefly are not addressed by more legislators. It's hard. There are 140 different systems. And on the child welfare side, upwards of 3 different pay structures per locality. Well, who can figure that out? And so it is super difficult. So what I would do in your shoes, number one, know your legislator. We're citizens. You gotta have the relationship that I have with Natalie Christian. You've got to be able to, know each other personally. But beyond that, pick 2 or 3 things you do incredibly well that your legislator likely doesn't know about, and tell them, show them, give them the example. Hey, man, I know you put a bunch of money out for X, Y, and Z. Just so you know how that works here in York County, here's what we do. And sometimes that's dealing with a legislative aide first, particularly as you go up the ladder in seniority and folks that have a myriad of responsibilities. But then I would also pick things you need and point out a need to them. And everybody needs more money. Okay. So that's, when we started talking about the aging work group, number one thing, oh, sure, there's Emily Brewer. The one thing we did was, first session, everybody said we need more money. And we said, yes, of course we do. But what would you do with it if we had it? Well, how would you utilize it? So I would start with a success, because y'all do amazing work that a lot of folks don't know about, because you think about it, whether we talked about mental health, whether we talked about foster care, whether we talked about child placement, unless you are uniquely involved in it as a human being, you likely, and fortunately, maybe for you, do not know about it, right? So, so when you're doing great things, make your legislator aware and understand that you've got folks that are really engaged and involved with it. Like my friend from Isle of Wight, Emily Brewer. Hello. Boy, are they tired of hearing from me. I am glad you are here.
I am so sorry, guys. I was trying to get connected and I never was connecting. So I'm so sorry. I'm glad to be here, Senator Mason. I'm sure you covered everything so aptly.
So,
Delegate Brewer, we want to welcome you. Thank you so much. I know I mentioned earlier that this is such a busy time of year for legislators. I mean, it's always busy, but this is especially busy. So we really appreciate you being here. And so just for members who may not have worked with Delegate Brewer before, she represents the 64th district in the House. So she represents the counties of Isle of Wight, Surrey, Prince George, and parts of the city of Suffolk. And so among her committee appointments is the House Appropriations Committee. So she's a member of the Health and Human Resources Subcommittee there, and she serves on many, many boards and commissions with an important focus on human services, so including the Joint Subcommittee on HHR Oversight, Joint Commission on Healthcare, Behavioral Health Commission, and the Commission on Youth. And so, Delegate Brewer, we were just getting kind of an update from Senator Mason on a lot of the issues that are being sort of top of mind in the legislature. So certainly behavioral health and the crisis with the state hospitals. We've talked a little bit about CSA and foster care changes, and also looking at kind of elevating aging services. And so just want to open the floor to you. I mean, we haven't touched a whole lot on foster care, which I know is a passion of yours. And so just love to hear kind of your thoughts on what's happening in that issue, and anything else you'd want to share.
Absolutely. Well, first of all, I couldn't have a better partner in any of this than Senator Mason, because he's just to the point, just like I am. And so when we sit through some of these meetings, we just kind of cut through some of the issues and get to where we need to be, which I think is how this should go. Obviously, I'm sure you guys are aware, a couple years ago, Senator Mason, myself, and Senator Favola worked on the Kinship Guardianship Assistance Act. Which I think is going to be in the future very transformational, as it's already getting legs, and people are learning and growing into what that program can be and what that can do. The most interesting thing that I think that we have done in the past couple of years that we will see probably more immediate change in is the definition of fictive kin, which I think is probably one of the more transformational things in recent time. A friend of mine I grew up with actually just asked me about a fictive kin situation just the other day. And, we don't realize how many times and opportunities we have when we're working with families to have diversion opportunities that might be, a totally different situation than what we had imagined. On another note, Senator Favola and I did have a sub-work group on the Commission on Youth that we're working on rewriting some of the guardianship and the guardian ad litem language, and it's been a very tough process. I will admit. I think there's so many people that want to attack this situation, similar to what other states are doing, but Virginia is unique. And if there's anyone, especially that's on this call, that might want to weigh in on that, we absolutely need your insight and your expertise and your input to make sure that we're doing the right thing going forward. Because Senator Mason and I and Senator Favola can only be the jack of all trades, but the master of none. And so that's where subject matter experts such as yourself really truly come in. As we come into the next budget year, though, I really want to, I don't want to say the good, the bad, the ugly, but one of the things that we have to be very aware of is that there are going to be many, many asks for a lot of money, and we need to be aggressive and purposeful in the things that matter most to us. There will be, with a new budget year, becomes many, many asks. And so anything that we're working on, we try to be judicious with assigning out those monies. And if there's something that might be more important to anyone over the other, please let us know. But Senator Mason, did you address any of the guardianship issues we're working on?
Not in depth. I think it'd be a great thing for you to walk through if you want.
Yeah, thank you. Absolutely. So has anyone on this call been on the guardian ad litem subgroup at all?
Yeah, I'm not sure that people can unmute. They might be able to put a note in the chat.
If you guys have not, I would absolutely encourage that you look at all the verbiage and language that is going through that for many reasons, but most importantly, how we're going to shape how Virginia looks going forward when it comes to guardian ad litem language and the court system. It is probably one of the single most consequential things that the work group out of the Commission of Youth will be working on in the coming year. So that would be my recommendation to see as we reconvene this work group in the coming weeks. Also, Senator Favola and I tomorrow actually will have a foster care forum group that will be coming up that Senator Mason and I will be, I'm sure, chatting about come January as we set all our legislative priorities. So if there are ever recommendations or things that we can do, or instances where things seem disconjointed and you might think it's a minor issue, I would encourage every last one of you, your personal experience absolutely matters. That's how we shape public policy in Virginia. I'd love to take any questions if anyone has any.
And that's a great point Emily makes, that when I started this aging out of foster care roundtable idea, I went to y'all first, and because I did not want it to be, this fancy senator this, senator that thing. I wanted it to be something that was meaningful and worked for what you were doing. And the Commission on Youth's roundtable with two previous foster children was a great start. But Emily makes a huge point there. If you see things that work, point them out. If you see things that don't, point them out, and make sure that, this organization, I think, does a great job of tracking and keeping up. But you don't want us fixing something that makes your life more difficult. So your input, the people on the ground that do it every day, are the key for what we're trying to accomplish. So I think that's a great point.
Thank you. And Delegate Brewer, I'll just offer this to you. So when you hopped on, Senator Mason had been asked a question about, how to advocate with local legislators about, the human services issues that are very complex, and the best ways to do that. And so maybe to follow up on what you had said about the breadth of requests for funding and resources that'll be coming across, your desk and those of your colleagues, in the next session. So what can we do to be good advocates to make sure that those issues are sort of on the table, knowing that, we've got to make the case with people who may not have necessarily your level of expertise and interest in the, complexities of the human services world?
I would say first this is that, as we're going through and we're doing budget requests, there are some things that we get federal monies for. There's some things that are matched. There's some things that have constraints. And if there is one-time funding for new programs, it's never usually one-time funding, right? One-time funding is one of those terms that they say things are sunsets. Well, they're not. Once we start something, it's very hard to stop it. And that could be anything, not just, the human services arena. But think about something that will have the most impact. Pick your top 2 or 3 things. Be passionate about those things, because there are certain things that even in our budget, we have to balance it. But the one thing that we don't do is when we get a fiscal impact statement for every time we propose legislation, what we don't see is the money that it might end up saving, right? So for instance, the KinGap program, even though there's a cost to that, there is a long-term savings probably to that, but there is no additional credit to the budget for that. And so if there are programs that you think could assist the community, but also may cost something on the front end, but might save on the back end, that's a very interesting selling point, especially in Virginia where we have to balance our budget. And so when you're thinking about your priorities, also think about the ways that we might be able to reinvent the wheel financially to make sure, all the wheels in the bus go round and we can balance our budget and while solving issues.
And it looks like we've gotten a question in the chat. I think this would be for Delegate Brewer. Could you say more about the guardianship effort? Are you totally rethinking the approach?
So that's not something that we are, quote, totally rethinking. We're in an investigative process really to hear from stakeholder groups. And that's why when I say input truly shapes public policy and your opinion matters, it absolutely does. We met earlier this spring via Zoom with this guardian ad litem subgroup, and we had judges, Commonwealth attorneys, child care advocates, all of these different stakeholders that were weighing in. And there was 3 or 4 different approaches that everyone felt very differently about. And it was so intense that we really needed to take a little bit longer to look at it. There were some people that liked what was called the Michigan model, I believe. There was others that wanted to do more of a hybrid approach or do bits and pieces instead of a total overhaul. And we have to take it very seriously when we look at our court system in Virginia and we try to reinvent the wheel. And so Senator Favola and I looked at that and said, okay, that might be a little bit too far. Maybe this isn't enough. We're going to continue the conversation and get some additional input outside of this group, because if we're going to rewrite an entire code section, we need to get it right. So I would say her and I don't have a vision of where we think it should be wholesale change without having stakeholder input first. So, but I would say that the Michigan model went a little bit too far.
You know, Katie, Dr. Abdullah asks a question in the chat about specialized training for students. I would like to ask this group to help us with your ideas on how we address the workforce issues that we're having across all the topics. You know, we understand there's a workforce challenge everywhere right now. But when we talk about in mental health or in social services or in child welfare, the shortfalls that we have of people, and I know we have to pay people real American money, which in a lot of places we don't. Right, so I get that part. But how do we, right now, how do we avoid if Emily and I are doing this in 5 years or in 10 years, how can we do something now that shows an impact down the road to getting more people into this line of work, to get to exposing more young adults and students to these careers, and figure out how we can make an impact on that. It is it is probably the biggest thing that concerns me is, you know, I always give her credit. Jennifer Faison, the Community Service Board Association, said, what's the best time to plant a tree? 20 years ago. And that's kind of where we've seen it coming. That's where we are. And so any input that this organization, Dr. Abdullah, anybody has for these ideas would be huge. Pay for training, supervision, and licensure, you know, that I'd like to do a student loan refinance program in Virginia, where we take a pot of this money that we've got right now and refinance people's loans down from 6, 7, 8% to 1, 2, 3%. And it might be 1% if you sign a 3-year contract to do some of these jobs. Maybe we'll make it 2% and pay for your licensure and credentialing. I don't know, but thank you for that idea. And anything you've got as an organization that you can bring to us with ideas, we need to be on it now.
And Katie, I want to follow up on what Senator Mason said. He's so very right. We look at issues, we want to be able to solve them and offer a solution. I was on the Joint Commission on Healthcare last week, and we had a gentleman come forward and talk about the counseling shortage in Virginia. We have 58 universities in the Commonwealth. We have 15 that offer degrees in some form of counseling. They brought to our attention that there's a shortage of marriage and substance abuse. Well, guess what? There's only 3 programs in Virginia that offer marriage and family therapy as a degree certification, and only 2 that offer substance abuse. Proportionally, those are the 2 that have the largest need. And so sometimes we really have to step back and look at the problem at a 30,000-foot view and then drill down to see where the issues are, because we offer incredible degree programs in our Commonwealth, but so sometimes we have younger people here and leaving, and we really have to drill down and see why that is, and wonder why we have some shortages that we do, and make a concerted, coordinated effort to really try to stop the bleed in certain degree areas and programs, so that way we can fix these problems long term.
It looks like you tapped into a rich vein of thoughts here, because there's a lot of comments coming in the chat with some ideas about the workforce issue. So, yeah, absolutely.
Well, maybe that's step one, and we understand your licensure and credentialing obligations today, and see, what's really needed. Let's see what we can do to make that easier. I mean, certainly we want qualified people, but that seems to be a recurring theme there, and some loan forgiveness. If you go into this line of work for this period of time, we will provide this type of benefit.
Well, I know we're sort of coming close to the end of the hour here, so I just wanted to kind of open the floor to you all for sort of parting thoughts, advice, maybe some of your predictions for the 2022 session and what you think might be sort of top issues, and so I open it to you all.
So I think Emily's right. Going into a budget year, boy, there are always plenty of options. We'll see what the governor includes on an outgoing basis. So y'all having conversations with the people in the administration as far as what we need to build on the momentum we have in places, or what we need to try to work towards very targeted efforts. And then back to kind of the way I suggested you lobby your member, is that, if something that's happening is working, bring that forward and show where it's working, and let's see if we can, build upon it. So a budget year is always quite interesting. So we'll have to. So I saw that somebody had it looks like you already have your General Assembly requests that are close to ready. I would say socialize them as quickly as possible.
I really have to piggyback on what Senator Mason said. So one of the biggest issues is people wait until well into the General Assembly session to come make their asks. If there are issues prior to budget filing deadline, which is going to be in the first week, please get us those asks and be specific about where you'd like to see them. Don't say, please assign money to this. Make a very specific ask. And also, I think one of the most important things that you can do is advocate in groups, not just with a lobbyist or a firm or whoever. Stop by, email us, call us, reach us in different formats, because with repetition, every different angle, and be reminded of such, and put it to the top of our list. But also, I wouldn't say we will have any prediction of what 2022 looks like. We don't even know what the past 2.5 years look like with COVID. I think that we're going to have some really tough struggles about how we reshape entire industries, whether it be human services, whether it be economic development. It's going to be a truly learning curve for all of us. And so if there are shortcomings that you're seeing in your industry, please let us know, because if you don't tell us, we won't know. So what I would say is reach out early and reach out often.
Yeah. And I mentioned before that there's a new director of the Office of Children's Ombudsman. And some of you may know Eric Reynolds, that was with OES for years and with the Attorney General's office. it's a new role in the governor's office with direct line there. So he is able to dig into and or review as an ombudsman would with a high degree of latitude. And so if you have things that you think need to be reviewed and addressed, I would recommend just reaching out to him and introducing yourself as well, because I think he is going to be a great resource for us on a go forward.
I absolutely agree. I actually met with Eric maybe a month ago in Richmond, and he is so ready, willing, and capable to really handle and take that office to the next level. And I'm so grateful that we finally are able to do that. So, and I want to thank you guys for having us. I'm sorry that I was able to join you late, but I mean, you couldn't get a better looking guy than Senator Mason joining you. I'm sure. So I'm sure you were incapable. Honored to be able to address the group.
I just wish I had a big display of wine behind me like you do. I'm in the wrong business. But so Emily talked about the guardian ad litem work. I've talked about the adult, about senior work group, the private day work group, the family first stuff. So there are a bunch of initiatives going on right now. So please feel free to reach out and just give us your ideas on these and any other things that you see going on, because we really need the voice and the direction of the professionals to get these things right as we're moving forward. So I agree. I appreciate you having us both, and sorry we couldn't do it in person. Emily and I'll have to come back and join you when y'all can meet in person again here before too long.
Absolutely. We would love that. And I really want to thank you both for sharing your wisdom and expertise with us. I mean, I think people have come away with this understanding just the volume and breadth of the issues that come across your desks. And I think you've given us some really good advice about how to be good advocates. And I hope you will view VALHSO and of course VACO as resources to you, in your work, and just thank you very much. So I think I'll hand it back over to Madam President.
Thank you.
Thank you. I want to echo all of what Katie just said. Oh my gosh, what a great way to end this day's conference is to listen to the wonderful insights from Senator Mason and Delegate Brewer. I'm left feeling mad and hopeful at the same time. So thank you. I do want to invite everybody to come back tomorrow. I mean, with all of these great presentations, I feel sorry that we have to wait another day to start. So 10 o'clock tomorrow starts with the information about Marcus Alert. Then we have Unite Virginia and Virginia's marijuana legalization. So please, again, join us tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock. Have a great afternoon.